The goal for this morning is to really focus on trying to give you a bit of a sense of what's in Visual Studio 2017, our latest release that is coming out soonish. I'm not going to declare a sort of press release by giving you a date, but we're working right now to put the finishing touches to it, and if I can get the right machine here. We took as our theme for this morning, faster, leaner, and more productive, because when we started working on Visual Studio 2017, there were 3 different things that we heard loud and clear from the various different feedback channels that we take on board. User voice is a site which we use heavily for feedback. We do a bunch of surveys and other things. And what people told us was, look, you know, features are great. Add some more, add specific things that help us be more productive, but also work on some of the fundamentals of Visual Studio. Make it faster, make it easier to install, make it work just better on my machine. And so we've been back with Visual Studio 2017 to a lot of the fundamentals and really worked to try and make it just a richer, stronger product for daily use. And so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to cover, we've got about an hour, we're going to cover as many demos as we can in this time. I've got a couple of opening slides, and we're going to see how much we can show you across the course of the next hour. So hoping it'll be a lot of fun, hoping you'll get some good new tips out of this, and again, thank you for being here so early to start. So with Visual Studio, you've probably seen, and if you've followed any of our other announcements, we're expanding the family a little bit. We have had Visual Studio as a core product for a good long while, but we're adding Visual Studio Code, we're adding Visual Studio for the Mac. We announced that just a couple of weeks ago. And so we're really trying to broaden for Microsoft what the developer tooling means, what different things you can use it for. And so our goal with Visual Studio is fundamentally, it doesn't matter what language you're building, what kind of developer you are, what platform you're using to develop the software, what platform you're targeting. We want Visual Studio to be the developer tool, the best developer tool for you. And so you'll see us continue to add and extend not just to the kind of core languages like C# and Visual Basic, but also adding more and more web technologies. We brought in Xamarin and made that a core part of Visual Studio recently. So between all of these different pieces, we're really trying to just expand out how far Visual Studio can go. And you'll see some of that in some of the demos through the course of today. Visual Studio Code, I've mentioned briefly already. Visual Studio Code is our lightweight text editor. It's really optimized for the pure inner loop coding sort of process. And we built this out first and foremost for that scenario. We shipped the first version about a year ago, and we've been updating it on a monthly basis since then. We've just crossed the 1 million active developers a month using Visual Studio Code, and so we're seeing that grow as well. And so as you see the broader portfolio of different apps, we think that Code is a useful adjunct, a useful extension to the core Visual Studio environment. It's particularly tailored for web development, where you've got a portfolio of different tools, and the editing is one thing you've got, and you may drop down to a command line. But we've got a suite of other pieces that fit into the equation. And then Visual Studio for the Mac is designed around mobile web development, designed around .NET development. And this comes for free. If you've already got Visual Studio and a Visual Studio subscription, Visual Studio for Mac is included in your subscription at no cost. So again, it doesn't matter which platform you're using or what you're targeting. And we've shipped a preview just again in the last couple of weeks. So you can go to visualstudio.com to get your hands on Visual Studio for Mac. So those are my slides. Oh no, there's one more. Visual Studio. We have a thing called Visual Studio. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. But we thought we'd spend as much time as possible in demos. So I've got a colleague that I'm hoping is going to join me. Unfortunately, Justin has been suffering from food poisoning and spent all night not feeling very well. So I'm sort of looking at him in the front row here for a kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down. But I hope you'll welcome me if he comes on stage. You'll welcome him with appropriate sympathy this morning. But we're going to show you a few different things, and we'll see how we get on. I want to start by going over to this machine here, and this is, I actually want to show you the installation experience. So this is Visual Studio. I've got a VM in Azure, and this is a demo that any of you can try at home. So this is the new installation experience. We've made it cleaner. We've really tried to tidy it up a little bit. One of the principal things we're doing with Visual Studio is to really enable you to target what you're building for the kind of working style that you have. So hopefully you can see that on the screen here. We've got a number of different what we call workloads. And a workload essentially represents a particular tribe or community or platform that you're targeting. We have 18 different workloads, one of these for each of the core kinds of things you might be building. So if you're building a UWP app for Windows 10, you're building a .NET desktop application, you're building a C++ application, you're building mobile apps, web apps, data-centric applications, games, you're building an extension for Visual Studio. You can pick the workload, one or more workloads of your choice, and install them here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to actually pick none of the above. So I'm going to go for the smallest Visual Studio environment available. And we'll install this literally on the fly as we go here. So the thing we've done with Visual Studio is we've taken the core of the product and we've looked at the fundamentals of what makes Visual Studio. And we said, well, OK, you've got the core shell. Let's take that piece and make that available as the smallest component of Visual Studio. And then let's take things like C# or ASP.NET and add those on top. Essentially, everything in Visual Studio now is an extension. The core of the product is this sort of small, lightweight core editor, and then everything else goes on top of that and adds to the various different components. And that makes it much, much smaller. The smallest installation of Visual Studio has gone down from about 6 gigabytes to 1/10 of the size that it was. And we're continuing to work on and refine that. So that's one of the core things that we've done here. The other thing we've done is we've taken Visual Studio's the code itself, and we've tried to remove a lot of the system impact of Visual Studio. So in the past, Visual Studio was built up out of MSIs, and there was a lot of stuff being stored in the registry, a lot of manipulation of Windows. We've taken, again, all of that out of Visual Studio, and now we're using the extension format. The registry stuff is all stored in a private registry using some technology from Microsoft Research. So none of that is part of the install. You can actually go in regedit and see if you can find Visual Studio, and you'll find, I think, just 2 entries in the entire registry hive for Visual Studio. And we're done. We're installed. What do you think of that? That is not a demo I'd have done with Visual Studio 2015. We'd still be watching it at the end of the presentation. But I've got the whole of Visual Studio installed in the time it's taken me to tell you about the installer. This is, as I say, the core Visual Studio product. This, just to be clear, this is a standard Azure VM. I've not made any changes to the Azure VM. So this is running off the cloud. So you see the installation the download of the components was quick because I had a fast internet connection. But other than that, there's no other tweaks or changes. You could reproduce this in your own environment. And we're up and running with Visual Studio. So again, pretty neat. The other thing we've done, so this is this minimal environment. This is, if you like, what we call the core editor. It's just the centerpiece of Visual Studio. To be clear, I don't yet have the C# compilers and C++ and Windows SDK and all those other pieces. This is the core of the product. What we've done with this is we've tried to make this a great environment for spelunking through code bases. So just the base experience, we want to deliver a great base experience no matter what language you're targeting. And so that's what we've got with this. We did some work in Visual Studio 2015 Update 1 to add support for TextMate bundles. And TextMate bundles are an increasingly common format for things, for essentially creating parsing for different languages. And we include about 20 different language parsers in the box with Visual Studio 2017 to target different kinds of language. And so I can use that to go and look at pretty much any kind of code. We also added in 2017 this new feature called Open Folder. So the days where you had to have a project and a solution to be able to open things in Visual Studio, that's gone too. So we're really working to try and sort of nail some of these different boundaries. So I'm going to just go and open a folder here. And I was trying to think of a code base that I could go and target that would give you a kind of demonstration of opening and working something pretty large here. I was thinking I could go git clone some random project and we could just take sort of a call from the audience. But I thought, let's pick one that is definitely fairly big and probably not the kind of project you'd think that Microsoft would pick. And so I'm just opening here the Linux kernel source code. So I just literally did git clone github.com/torvalds/Linux. And this is literally the Linux code base here. You see I have folder view turned on here. This is because I did file open folder instead of open solution. And here you can see my entire solution. This is the full Linux code base here. So I can go and sort of spelunk through here and say, okay, well, let's see what goes on in the CPU.c. That sounds like a fun function to look at. And let's zoom into that a little bit here. So again, you see what I've got here out of the box without anything else. I've got some coloring, some syntax coloring. I've got some basic IntelliSense. I've got syntax aware structure here, so I could go and start sort of editing. I'm not going to really start editing the Linux code base, obviously, but you can see what we've got here. In the background, it's doing a bit of file indexing, which will enable me to do symbolic parsing through the entire code base, and that's obviously going to take a little while. But in the meantime, I can also go and I can do a search in the solution folder view here. So I can type in something like spin and see, well, where's the spin lock code base, and I can go and find the spin lock for the kernel, spinlock.c, and sort of spelunk through there. I can look at all the files that are just a particular file extension, so I'll do .sh and find some shell files. And again, this is a bash shell script that I've got color coding and syntax highlighting and all those good stuff. So pretty cool, right? So that's the new installer, lightweight, fast, easy to work with. Another thing we've done as we think about just sort of making that sort of whole process cleaner and easier, we've really just tried to slim down things like the start page, quieten some of the noise. We've got some developer news here, but I can go and push that out the way, and I can just get focused on the core of my project here. I can see all the different things that are relevant to me. I can pin my solutions and so on. So that's the kind of the basics of the product. And now I'm looking at Justin to see if he's feeling well enough. Will you join me in giving Justin a round of applause, who's made it off his sick bed to present a few features?
Thanks, Tim. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. This is very exciting. Let's turn our machine on here, 6, and I'll just wake it up. But while it wakes up, it's just gone to sleep. That's a bit unfriendly, isn't it?
It's gone to sleep.
Yeah.
Has it gone to sleep, or has it gone?
I don't.
Is it suffering from food poisoning?
Ah,
there we are.
I saw something.
Good.
Great. So following on from what Tim's just shown us, we want to have a look at we want to make it easy for people to get in. So firstly, we can download and install Visual Studio easily, which is great. And I can't tell you how many times that's come in handy for me since I work on the product. I'm installing this thing all day, every day. And I'm grateful that I can, in a couple of minutes, install a fresh version of Visual Studio on my machine. But check this out. Sometimes we have to work with projects. Let's say we're working with languages. And many of us here work with solutions that have many, many projects in them. And if anyone's experienced this, it can take quite a while to get in. So we've made it faster to download and install it, and we've made it easy to just get up and running with folders. But what about you want to get up and running with your solution that contains 10, 20, 50, or 100 projects? We've introduced a new feature in VS 2017 called Lightweight Solution Load. And it's available through the projects and solutions here, this new option for Lightweight Solution Load. And with this activated, what happens is if you try to load a solution with multiple projects, it gets you in as quickly as possible. It doesn't open or load any of the projects And I'm going to demonstrate with Productivity Power Tools, which is just this week being upgraded for this new version of Visual Studio 2017, and I know that will make a lot of people happy. I've got 22 projects in this solution, and as I go to open it up now, it usually takes about 3 seconds per project. With 25 projects, it takes about a minute. But with lightweight solution load, I'm already up and running. And straight away, I've got a file open. I've got color coding. I'll skip that out. Uh-oh, not authorized. That's fine. I can immediately gain access to Intellisense, refactoring, color coding. Let's say I have var x equals. All of this is coming up, and I haven't loaded a single project. But if I want to load a project, all I need to do is expand it, and it starts loading in the background. This file is loading in the background, and you can see that it's loading up the project now. So now I can expand it and see all the rest of the things. But in the meantime, I have all the refactoring and find options available to me. I can look for my files. They're going to show up in my search results. It's got this clever thing where it says if you didn't find what you're looking for, then you can look in all the other solutions. So, which is very handy if you've got a large project, and you know you're going to work in one project, and you just don't need to open the other projects. But the main reason why a lot of people do load all their projects is because if you're looking to do a refactoring and you change something in one project, you want to make sure it affects the other. Lightweight solution load handles all that brilliantly, so it will refactor unloaded projects. And it lets you edit files, and even opening a file doesn't force a project load. So you can get away, edit, navigate, do whatever you like. It's only when you really need the project open or expanded, it'll load it when you need it. So we think that's great. I hope that helps you guys with your large solutions. I'm going to turn that one off now and demonstrate some more cool features. Right, now, this one we're very excited about. The Navigate to experience of the past, well, it hasn't been as nice as we would have liked. So what we've introduced today is a new form of go-to. Now, go-to is our new name for the old Navigate to experience, because it allows you to go to anything you need to go to. Whether it's lines, files, symbols, members, instead of seeing a huge list of everything available in the solution, we've now introduced filtering into the go-to, so you can immediately filter down to files or types or members. I'll demonstrate that now. Let's pick a project. How about, well, we might as well do it right inside, I'll open up the bike project. No, how about I use my hot commands project. So I'm going to open up hot commands. There's a few projects in here, and I'll demonstrate how this works. So if I open up my go-to with control comma, whatever I type in here, I get a list of everything. And you see that we've got files, types, classes, symbols, all sorts of things in this huge list. But if I'm only interested in classes that have the word text in it, there's these new filter buttons down the bottom. We can now filter just by files, just by types, symbols, or members. So let's say I want types. Show me any types or classes. And this is the one I was looking for. Command filter text view creation listener. It's quite a mouthful. You'll notice also that we've introduced a new query syntax. Users of Visual Studio Code will be familiar with this. You can use letters at the front of your query. So you can say, well, I didn't want to type. Let's say I wanted a file, and you can put the letter F in it. Now it's going to filter it by files. And you can see that this is reflected in the file filter at the bottom. And if I turn that off, again, we go back to everything. But for those keyboard users like me who want to get directly to a class and want a shortcut to take us straight there, we've introduced a bunch of new shortcuts, and we've moved go-to to the top of the edit menu. So now you can directly go to find for type, which is the one I use most often. And of course, these keyboard shortcuts are configurable, and you can change the different keyboard maps and layouts. But for right now, we've chosen Control-1 as the base key for this. We've also introduced Control-T as the main go-to, as many users were familiar with Control-T from other keyboard mapping suites. So if I want to go straight to a file, I can go Control-1, F, and start typing away, and it's immediately filtered. So that's our new go-to feature. We also have improved the find all references. In the past, doing a find would return a flat list of files like this, which was useful and would take you to where you needed to go, but wasn't as pretty as it could have been and wasn't as useful as it could have been. Well, now we have got the ability to show you this and let you customize how you'd like to see your results. If I run Shift F12 on this file, you can see now this is our new find all references. Check it out. it's now grouped. So this is particularly useful if you're looking to filter, group by different things. You can add columns, you can sort by columns. We've allowed you to now choose which columns you want to see, put the definition in there, or grouping. Grouping's really cool. Let's say we've introduced a few new predefined groups. Let's have a look at definition, then project. So it just keeps it nice and flat, but if you're looking for more information, definition, project, and path, we'll flatten it out a bit more. I'm going to use my new go-to symbol feature, Control-1S, and see if I can find join. I know that this one's got a few references that span the project. I press Shift F12, I get this list coming up, and now I can browse. I say I'm not interested in the refactoring provider, so I can close that down. I can say I want to sort by the file name anti-alphabetically, move columns around. So it's a much better experience with the find references. This box also goes to our edit box. It's the same tool, so you can use the navigation. You would use F8 and Shift F8 to go to each reference inside there. Also, we've introduced keep results. So I can pin this tab, go find something else, look for references on that, and now you see I've got find all references 1 kept there for me so that I can come back to it, and find all references 2 showing up here as well. I think that's pretty exciting. So thank you for the applause in the front. Appreciate that. Wow. Pause for applause. Oh, you guys are making me feel better already. I'm glad to be up here on stage. Let's see what else. All right, now check this out. Productivity Power Tools, which I briefly mentioned earlier, has always been a very popular extension for Visual Studio, as it provides additional things that haven't been in the product. We put things into Productivity Power Tools. If the users like them, we build them into the product. And one great example of that is the structure visualizer. People love seeing these little lines coming in their code. So we've put this in the product now. Check out what you can do. When you hover your hand over one of these structure lines, it shows you every parent block that's affecting this line. So I can see that this is belonging to the namespace of hot commands. It's in the class Roslyn extensions. I'm in the method getting unused, and I'm in a for each and an if statement. We've also enhanced the block tagging. So previously you could only collapse up to a method. Now you can collapse as little as an if statement or a for block, which just makes it a little bit easier if you're working with your code. You can more easily open and close these regions. Change modifier. Oh, you like that one. Change modifier action. Okay, now also editor config. This is a popular thing that's been going around, not just here at Microsoft at Visual Studio, but it's becoming a global standard for the way to configure your settings. So we've adapted that, and we're building editor config into Visual Studio. A great example of this is, have a look. I have set my own C# standard to use spaces, mostly because the team forces that upon me, though I love tabs, but we'll leave that one for another side. Here you'll see that being a good team member, I've got insert spaces as my default. But I have installed an editor config file into the hot refactorings project. And so as a result, anything that I do inside the refactorings will obey the editor config that I have set to it. So let's say if I just choose to introduce a new public method. Interface here, public, my method. If I turn on my white space margins, you can see that here it's actually put tabs in, because tabs are my editor config preference that live inside my editor config file. So this means that you can use your own custom editor config settings for different projects, especially if you work in many teams. You might have several projects. One of them's using spaces, one of them's using tabs. You can have a different file in each one and keep the standards and settings consistent, which is a big bonus for teams trying to achieve consistency. Now, I get to show you about some new cool stuff in our C# language features. At Microsoft, we are constantly working on improving our languages and making them better for the developers. And we did some great things last year, but not everybody knows about them. How are developers meant to discover all these new language features? Well, we've introduced some tooling, some refactoring, and some assistance in Visual Studio so that you can start to see what these new features are and take advantage of them and use them in your coding. To demonstrate some of these features, I'm going to open up another project. Let's see. I've got my little bike workout training app here. And first thing I'm going to tell you about is Tuples, or Tuples, depending on where you grew up. This is probably the most exciting new change to the language. Tuples allows methods to return more than one value. And how good is that? How often have you wanted to get two things out of a method? So you can use one as the return value, you can use out parameters, you can construct classes that you use. All of those are fiddly ways of trying to get more than one thing out of a method. Well, with tuples, you can simply declare that your method will return multiple things. Here's an example. It's very exciting, I know. I'm bubbling inside about showing you this. So here's an example. This highest count that comes out of most frequent intensity is a combination of two values. And we return that. Now, you can work with these values with item 1 and item 2, and that's how you would use the fields. But we've made it a little bit easier. So you can put a name in, and you can name the items inside your tuple. And once you've named the items inside your tuple, they're now available on Intellisense, and you can start using them here. We've also made it so that you can deconstruct the tuples. Let's say I want to output this line here. So let's say I have a var, and whatever it's going to be, which I always fill out later, is going to be most frequent intensity. Now, what is my variable going to be? Well, my variable would be a tuple, but if I open bracket here, and let's say I want most frequent intensity, and I make up my own names here, and this the count of intensity. And now I'll have the two values of the tuple available to me here, and I can then refer to them here in my string. I can put most frequent, and there they come up in my IntelliSense count of int. So that's our new tuple feature, and I hope you all enjoy using that. The next thing is IntelliSense filtering. We've made some improvements to IntelliSense filtering. Oh, and I'm going to turn off this. You can see, again, I'm breaking coding standards here. I wouldn't want my boss to see that. So I'm going to hide my white space so they'll never know. Now, let's talk about new IntelliSense filtering. IntelliSense has always offered you the ability to see all available methods, parameters, properties, everything. Sometimes too much, I think we'll all agree. Let's say if var x equals, there are so many things in this list, I don't even know where to start. This is where we've introduced these cool new buttons. Check this out. We can filter by locals and parameters. Locals, and I only get what's in this very method right now, which is great. Or I could filter by properties. I could filter by fields. You can actually combine these things. So if I want all locals and all properties, now I've got all the property of the class as well as my locals here. We've got filters for methods, interfaces, classes, structures, enums. Are there any enums beginning with M? Yes. So these are all, you can add these to your filters. This just makes life a lot easier. And I'm going to demonstrate that now. If I want to do a null check on this notes thing, because I never want someone to pass in a null, if, open. Now, open up my IntelliSense, filter by local variables, which is Alt-L, and straight away there's the 3 that I've got access to. So notes. Now, if that's equal to null, what are we going to do? We're going to throw a new argument null exception. Also, something else, notice how we've bolded the letters that show how we've found these search results. So you get a better idea. It's like, why is argument out of range exception turning up? And it shows you because the ARG and the EXC are coming as part of this. I'm interested in the argument null exception, so I'll choose that there, close that off, and leave that go. So that's our IntelliSense filtering. Now, but wait, there's more. We have, what's next? Okay, check this out. Static code analysis. I'm going to demonstrate how we do this. Somewhere in Tools Options now, for each language, we've got this new thing called code style. This is fantastic. This lets you customize your code style to your preferences. A great example of this is the var keyword. It's become standard for a lot of people to use var, and it's great. It simplifies code, but sometimes I like to see what the variables are, and most of the time I prefer to. So I can set my preferences for var, and I'll say that if ever I find a var, make preferring explicit type a suggestion. And I've done that. I've set that myself for all of these preferences here. And there's a whole bunch of different things that you can customize to your own liking. I'll demonstrate how this works now. So with those things set in, if I find a var in my code, here's one. Notice there's these little dots that appear underneath it. Those dots are there because I've configured this to offer me a suggestion. And when I click on it and bring up the quick action, with Control Dot, you can see it suggesting that I use explicit type, which in this case is a dictionary of intensity and int, instead of var. And I can, if I want, apply that to the whole document, the project, or the solution. But in this case, I'll just apply it to this very one here. So that's a new thing that we've brought in. This also means you can do other things. Let's see. Let's have a look at string interpolation. This has been around for a little while. Not everybody knows about it. Here's a great example. Why don't I use the one that I did before? This string format, this is the old school way of doing strings. You'd put in your brackets, put your numbers, and put your variables outside. Well, the new part of the new language feature is to use string interpolation. And if you knew about it, you could have just put a $ there and moved it around. But we've made it easier now. Control Dot will offer this to you. And it'll convert it, and it'll show you that it'll put the variables in. I'll accept that, and now it's got that in. So now I've just learnt more about the language, and I've found it available to me. And so that's a great way of discovering and using the tool. What else have we got? We've got explicit type, string interpolation. All right, let's have a look at our new throws expression. This is kind of cool. We've decided that if we're going to do something like notes equals notes, but you're going to null check it beforehand, well, many people have probably seen the new question mark syntax. It's pretty cool, and it's usually used for if this value is null, then apply the following value. But we've introduced a thing where you can actually throw an exception instead of applying a value, which is still doing my head in, but it's there, and it's great. So, and here's an example. You'll notice that the code here has gone gray. And that's telling me something's funny. So if I hover my hand over it, it's suggesting I use a throws expression. So if I do that, ding, it takes away all that code, puts a nice pretty little question, throw argument. So there's our new helpers for new throws exception. And those are just some of the cool new refactorings and features that we've come out with in Visual Studio 2017, and we're constantly building more. You should see our backlog. We're working very hard to get as many of these refactorings available to you as we can. And if they're not in there and you want to build your own, we'll talk about that later. But for now, I'm going to hand back over to Tim. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Good job for making it through. So, leaner, faster, more productive. We're working on making it leaner and faster, a new installation experience, making it easier to get into your code quickly with things like Open Folder, whole slew of productivity features that Justin's just demonstrated, both to the language and to the Visual Studio Tools Editor. I'm going to show you a couple of others as well. So I thought I'd start with a UWP example. So if you're building a Windows 10 application, you probably kind of know that Windows 10 sort of comes from a heritage of Silverlight and WPF and other XAML-based technologies. And so one of the big things we've done in this specific release is to work on, again, bringing in some of that productivity directly into the platform here. So I'm going to start with a simple example here. I'm going to use a little package that we've got, which is part of what we call the Uwp Toolkit, a suite of third-party community or additional community controls and things that you can add to your environment. So I'm going to put in an image here. This is just a very, very simple page. It's just literally a page with a grid inside it. And I'm going to go and grab an image. So we'll have an image in my assets folder here. I've got this unicorn PNG, which I'm rather fond of. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that in here. So it's image source assets msft unicorn.png. So I'll put that in there. But rather than just showing this as an image, I thought it'd be kind of fun to add a drop shadow around this image. So I've got this thing in the toolkit here called a drop shadow panel. And that basically applies as a parent around something like an image and lets you quickly put a drop shadow around it. But hang on, I've got a squiggly line here. Well, it's warning me that it's not supported because it's not one of the default layout containers here. But notice it's giving me another one of these light bulbs that Justin mentioned, one of these sort of refactoring warnings. We've now added these for XAML as well as for C#. So now you can go ahead and do something like this. In this case, it's spotting not only that I've got this thing that isn't referenced, but also that I've got one of them in one of my references. So you see here that it's warning me that I've got the opportunity to add a new namespace. And if I click on there, you see it goes and grabs the reference there. It goes and puts in a control, and it appropriately prefixes the drop shadow panel with the appropriate control. So a good example of how we're trying to make this more productive and fast as well. So let me go and build this project, and hopefully that'll build all right, and then I'll show you something else associated with it. Let's just give it a moment to build. It's pulling down its resources. Started, load local machine. And you can check out my cool unicorn. Here it comes, splash screen, and there it is. There's my unicorn with my drop shadow panel. I can see how impressed you all are at 8:30 in the morning. But wait, there's more, because that's kind of cool, but there's a slight problem with this. If I just go and move across to the unicorn a moment, as I move this around a little bit, as I resize this drop shadow, it's kind of a bit weird. It's kind of a cool effect, but it's kind of not what I intended. You see that the drop shadow isn't really following the unicorn. It's kind of appearing sort of in the background here. And maybe that's okay, maybe that's not. But I want to change that. I actually wanted the drop shadow to follow the unicorn around. And now with UWP, we have live edit and continue. So what I can do now is I can go into this drop shadow panel, and hopefully you can still see that code there. And I can go ahead and set an offset. Let's think of what the various different pieces I need to put in here. I'll set in an alignment to set this to align to center, and a vertical alignment to the center. And the problem here is basically that the drop shadow was sitting and was aligned to the top left instead of the middle of it. So do you see how as I change that, the drop shadow changed live in the running code to be in the appropriate place? That's pretty cool, right? Yeah. Let's go and change it a bit further. We'll move the offset to go back 10 pixels on the X side. We'll change the offset on the Y angle to be, let's put it minus. And you see, as I'm changing this code, this is appearing live in the code. As soon as it compiles it successfully, it's going to go ahead, there we go, and it's moving that around. So I can really start working on the design, the layout of my machine here. Let's go for something nice and pretty here. Let's go for a red background here, F00. Let's see how that works. Oh, splendid. Check out my unicorn. I'm really proud of that. And now as I move this around, I can resize this. It's still going to appear right. I can maximize it. I can continue to play, and the drop shadow is still appearing in the right place there. So edit and continue for your UWP applications. That makes it really straightforward to see what's going on. One other thing we've done is we've added support for some new diagnostics. You see I've got here in this Diagnostics tools window, this is something that lets me see everything that's going on in my app. So I can see as events fire, if I had a button click event or something like that, I can see what's going on. Some of that's been around for a little while, but we've now got this new feature called UI analysis. And what that lets me do is it lets me see specific UI capabilities that might be relevant to my code. So here you see it's fired up here some historical exceptions as I was editing the code. And here it's giving me almost like a kind of an FX cop style cop rule here, an analyzer that is warning me that my element of type UI controls drop shadow panel has a UI automation name that is null or empty. Now what the heck is that? I can go and look that up. I can get some more information from here, and it'll basically tell me all the different warnings that might come up. In this case, it's an accessibility warning. It's letting me know that this container object has no name that can be read by a screen reader, so it's a little bit challenging to figure out what that is. And so I can go and figure that out and update that with just putting in an accessibility field on there to go and give it a descriptive name, and that would get me past that. So some really cool features there that start to open up what you can do from a productivity perspective with UWP. Let's close that solution. We'll stop debugging. And I want to move on now and talk about some other languages and different pieces of support that we've been building in here. So Justin's talked about C#, and all those features that he's shown you, they work on VB as well. I've shown you some UWP development. I want to show you a different language that you might not have seen before in Visual Studio, and that's the R programming language. R is a language that is incredibly popular right now amongst data scientists because R is designed to be able to manipulate large quantities of data quickly, to be able to do things like reformatting that data, to do great data visualizations, to do statistical analysis. We introduced an extension for Visual Studio 2015 that supports R. Now we're building that along with other languages like Python and Node.js directly into Visual Studio as one of those workloads. You can pick a data science workload when you install Visual Studio, and you immediately get support for R. So you see I've got this menu that appears here, which is called R tooling. And I can use this to go and reset my Visual Studio environment to really be a powerful R IDE. Now, R is a really strong language, but historically they haven't had great development tools. And what we're doing is we're bringing everything that Visual Studio has to offer, things like Intellisense, colorization, debugging, directly into the R environment. So here in this project, I've just got this little sample to show you, and I've got a couple of raw data files here in CSV format. This one is a list of airports. It's essentially the airport name, the airport code, the excuse me, the latitude and longitude for that airport. And then I've got a separate file here which shows common routes between different airports. And so two different files here, just raw, unstructured data. This is the kind of stuff a lot of us have to work with on a regular basis here. So I'm going to go and go into this piece of R code here, and I'm just going to, for the sake of speed, I'm going to just go and execute a few commands here. So in the bottom here, I've got my R interpreter. This is just like any other kind of runtime environment here. And I'm going to start reading in this data, my airports. I'm going to add some column headers to the airports, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same with the routes. Here we are, oops, up the top here. And excuse me, got a frog in my throat. I'm so excited about R, I'm becoming a little overwhelmed. So here you can see my variable explorer, and now you can see that I've loaded those two CSV files in. I can see how many different rows, how many observations of how many different variables, and I can start to explore this in a tabular format. So with one line of code in R, I can read a CSV file. It's one line of code to read an Excel spreadsheet. It's one line of code to read a bunch of other common data formats. But let's now do something a bit more fun with that. And I'm going to go and just run a bit of code here to do some manipulation on that data. Basically, I'm going to take those two different data sources and merge them together to give me a new data frame which contains the two mapped together. And so now I've got some useful information that I can start to plot. I've got from locations, I've got departures, and I've got some useful stuff that I can work with. So I've got this library here, and this is taking data from Google Maps. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load that library in, and you see there it's loaded the plotting library there. I'm going to go grab a map of the US, and I'm going to go and plot it. And to plot this thing, all I'm doing is I'm plotting the map itself, and then I'm plotting a point for every one of those longitude, latitude coordinates with the size determined by how many departures that go from each of those different airports. So we'll just hit return on that and run that. And here you see with, what, a total of maybe 6 lines of code, I've been able to grab two different data sources, merge them together, and plot a map out of that. And the R environment is giving me this kind of beautiful view built into the environment. I can go and save this into a PDF, and let's call this my map, and we'll go and, when that pops up, there it is. Let's open that up, and you can see this map at a slightly higher resolution. And so again, just one more line to go and turn it into, or just one click in the toolbar, rather, to turn it into a PDF for the map. So R is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And I can do some pretty neat things with just a couple of lines of code using Visual Studio. Again, I can create a solution out of that. I can go and debug that line by line. I can trace through the different elements here. You can see I can attach a debugger and get a lot more out of it. So that's R. Let me take one more example here, and I'm going to go ahead and use Visual Studio to go and create a different kind of project altogether. So I'm going to go new project here for the moment, and I'm going to go and create here not a C# application. I'm going to go for a C++ application. And I'm going to go cross-platform. And I'm going to pick the Linux cross-platform application type. So we've added, beyond everything else now, the ability in Visual Studio to go and create projects, create applications that don't just run on Windows, but also run on Linux. And again, this is something new that we're adding directly into the environment here. I'm going to reset my window environment back to a traditional kind of Solution Explorer kind of view here. And so I've got here my main function here. And this is pure C code intended for compilation to run on Linux. So I've got just a simple printf statement here. Let's go and add something like int I equals 0, I is less than 10, I++, and press, let's put in some, we'll do, this kind of program is about where I started my computing career, aged about 10, sort of writing little apps that displayed things on library computers, usually hello mom or something like that. So this is just a very, very simple example of an app, obviously, here. And you see that what I need to do is I need to be able to compile and debug that. So let's go and do that. And what I've got here is I've got the ability to connect to a remote debugger environment on a Linux machine. And I set this up by going into Tools Options. And if I go here into the cross-platform setting here, I can create a connection to another machine. So here I've hopefully got a machine sitting and running with Ubuntu Linux installed on it. And I've basically created this with the GCC compiler. So with a bit of luck, if I start building this project with Control-Shift-B, if my Linux server is responding OK, this is going to go and take my code. It's going to copy the sources back to the server and compile it on the Ubuntu machine, or not. It can't connect to the remote system. This is what happens when you plug a projection into the into the machine. It immediately stops working. Let's see what's going on here. I'm going to go and see if this machine is down or what's going on here. SSH, TMS, 76, 84, 25. Oh, no, wrong folder, wrong machine. Let's go back to this one. Do you know what? In the interest of time, I might just pause that demo. Sadly, but that's the principle of it. Is that I can take my machine environment, wrong machine again. Let's go back to this one here, and I'm determined to see if I can figure out why this isn't working. Let's see if it's just a matter of kicking it into life here. Let's create a separate one. Let's just remove that one for a minute. So this is how you go and create a connection anyway. You go in here, oh, it won't work because it can't, I've just removed it. You put in your location of your remote machine, which might be a Docker machine, a container on your local machine. It might be a machine that is sitting on the internet, as is in my case here. Let's try password. See if this is going to connect. Oh, it's connected. OK, let's try again. Oh, that time it's worked. Yay! OK, so we're up and running. Let's see if we can. In fact, I'm going to set a breakpoint on this, and I'm going to see if this is going to work. Come on. Let's cross our fingers. OK. Anyway, that's the theory. We're still working on this. We have a release candidate here. We'll continue to build and improve on this over time. But we're adding support for Linux. We're adding support for building iOS applications with Xamarin. We're building support for building things with R and Node and Python, lots of different pieces that you can go and create. I think we've got time for one more demo. Justin, right. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling
good enough to do one more demo.
I cannot wait to show off live unit.
All right, let's have you show off live unit testing.
All right, well, thank you. I can tell you, I saw this demo on Linux working yesterday. It's pretty cool. He was able to debug through it on a Linux system, which is pretty cool. But, of course, it's demo world, and not everything works in demos. But I will show you live unit testing in the next few minutes. This is really cool. Now, moving on from what Tim was talking about with the ability to edit your code while it's running, Live unit testing provides a very similar feature. We're looking to move your productivity back to the point where you're writing code. Not write the code, wait for your punch cards to be developed, and then see how your code runs, or whatever the modern day system of doing that is. Now we want to be able to get instant feedback. So we've created this thing called live unit testing. And I am super excited to demonstrate this. And I think it's apt that we've left this right to the end, because this is probably the most exciting thing we've got to show for you today, in my opinion. Let's have a look. Here we have this solution that I was working on, my bike app solution. Now I'm just going to turn it on and just let the magic happen. So what we do, under the test menu now, there's a new menu item for live unit testing. And when I press start on this, it opens up a new margin here. And in the time it takes me to complete this sentence, it's going to be going through, running all my tests, and then showing me the results right there in red and green ticks as to which lines are being covered. This shows you both code coverage as well as test passing. It's exciting. I'll just pause for a moment to let you all take this in. Look at these ticks. Every single line of code that I've got here has either got a tick, a cross, or a little blue bar. The ticks indicate that these lines are covered by tests and that all tests on this are passing. Red indicates that at least one test is failing, and blue indicates that this line hasn't been covered at all. This is really useful if you're looking at your code and want to know straight up, what have I not created tests for? It's also a great way of navigating to your test classes, which I'll demonstrate in a minute. But first, I'm just going to show you how we can use this in our daily life to make our experience better. Take this method here, Tweetify workouts. I can see that some of it's being passed, but some of it's not. And all the way up to here, I've got some problems. When I click this, it shows me. Now, of tests that pass, it shows me how long they took, which is useful. But of tests that failed, it shows me what the exception is, right there, right in front of me. If I want to, I can click on this, and it will take me to the test. And here's my test there. I'd like to replicate that error I saw, so I'm going to debug that now. Spinning up, building, debugging. It should start to run, and then I'm expecting it to just fall over in a big heap. Let's see. Ta-da! There we go. So it seems that we've got a problem here. Somewhere on this line has caused an exception, a null reference exception. Now this is really cool. Check this out. It's part of our new exception helper. We are now telling you what is null. Look at this. Of all these things that could be null, the workout notes, the like, how good is that? So I no longer will I muck around trying to look up and working out in my head what could possibly be null and what couldn't. I'm just going to stop the test straight away and fix it. So right here on this line, I have a problem. Now, pay attention to these little marks on the left. What I want you to notice, it happens so quickly you might miss it, but as I type code, almost every keystroke I press, it's rerunning these tests to see if the code that I've written has fixed these tests. While it's rerunning them, you'll see a tiny little icon, little timer that says, hang on, I'm just running my tests. And then when it's finished, you'll get a new result, red, green, blue. So I know I need to null safe the workout variable. No, it was notes that was null, right? So if I put workout.notes equals null, let's say if it's null, then we'll just return no notes. Else, we'll do that. Now, watch the little icons on the left. It's rerunning my tests. Hold. Hang on, error. I've got a question mark, close quote. What happens after that? Colon, space. Rerunning tests. Bam! Green marks everywhere. All my tests are passing. Hello! I'm going to take a step over here, and a bow, and thank you. And so this is how live unit testing really makes you more productive. No going over rerunning my test straight there in my face. And then when I'm finished with it and I don't want to see those little green marks all over my code, I can just press stop and turn it off. Do I have one time? Yes, one more little thing I'm going to show you.
1 minute.
And this is the cool little thing that we put in. When you're going to debug your tests, if you want to step through it, people are familiar with using the step over, step into features. But there's a new thing we've got called run to cursor or run to click. So if I debug this test here, it starts running, and it'll stop at my first debug breakpoint, which I've included over here. It stopped. Now I can step over and step over using the shortcut F10, over, but I can now use my mouse. Watch this. As I move my hand down the line, everywhere you see at the beginning of each line, there's a little plus pause. And if I click, it just runs straight to there. Click here, runs straight to there. And now we've gotten past our error. Yeah! It's very exciting. That's about all I need for today. So I'm going to hand over to Tim to finish up. Thank you.
Justin.
And I might sit down since I'm not well.
So a bunch of different things. Leaner, faster, more productive. That is our goal, to get you up and running quickly, to make you more productive with your code, to make Visual Studio less impactful on your system so you can use it with more confidence. We've got a bunch of different things to help you out. In particular, if you've got questions or you've got issues with Visual Studio, one of the things that is probably least understood about Visual Studio is how much we spend our time looking at and responding to feedback. So this little icon in the top right-hand corner here, barely visible, lets you report a problem. So if you're hitting any issue with Visual Studio, whether it's through the setup process or during the usage of Visual Studio, you can go and log some issue here in the report a problem section. My team triages this literally every day, and we look for new things that people are hitting. We look for things that we can solve and fix in the products. And with the new installer technology, we're going to be able to pump out updates much, much, much more quickly. Since we shipped the RC of Visual Studio, we've already shipped 2 updates, and we have 4 or 5 more coming out over the course of the next month or so. And we're going to keep pushing these things through faster and faster and get better and better at making small surgical updates to Visual Studio that take a matter of a minute or 2 to install on your machine, rather than half an hour to install on your machine. So we're going to continue to invest in making Visual Studio faster, more productive, and less impactful on your machine. So where do you go to get Visual Studio? Well, it's pretty easy. You just go to visualstudio.com. And we would love your feedback right now on Visual Studio 2017 as we're in these late RC stages. We'd love you to try it with your real-world code. We'd love you to try out the installer. We'd love you to try out the various different features that Justin's mentioned. And give us feedback with that report a problem piece. You can also give us praise, but we'd like to know if there's things we need to do to go fix this. There's a ton of other sessions at this conference on Visual Studio 2017, and I'm not going to try and call them all out, but there's sessions on almost every different aspect that we've touched on today. So with that, I think we've covered as much as we can. We've showed about 25 different demos showing different features of Visual Studio. I really hope you like it. We've put a lot of work in from our team, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much for coming today. Have a great day. Thank you.